want to turn it to Tim. Tim said something really interesting about concentration in the portfolio. So I think, Tim, your organization is very lucky to be in some of the best managers on the planet. And have enjoyed some great returns, and you have a very, very concentrated portfolio. Now, going forward, how do you think about evolving that portfolio? And what is your thought about, venture is all about power law. It's kind of, I know those of you, I know there's an influential book out called The Four by Scott Galloway, and he talks about type 2 portfolios. So a lot of, whether you are a chief investment officer or you are a chief information officer or chief executive officer, CEO, you need to watch out for things that might have big impact on your portfolio, but might come from the left field, whether it's search as a sector or e-commerce as the emergence of Amazon or Facebook. So how do you find this the new ideas which might be very, very impactful?
Yeah, I think, well, first, if you're going to run a concentrated portfolio, you need to ensure you have the governance structure that aligns with that, because you will have more volatility and fairly significant volatility. And we think of ourselves as benchmark agnostic. And so when we pick managers, none of them think about what benchmark they're trying to beat. They're all thinking about absolute levels of return. And so our job in that kind of portfolio is really around holistic construction to make sure that we're thinking about how every piece fits in the overall portfolio. It's not about how you maximize your private portfolio, how you maximize your hedge funds or public equities. It's how you maximize the whole. And the more concentrated you get, the more important that becomes. And so an example of the challenges that we face is we have 10 public equity managers, which account for about a third of our portfolio. They're overweight information technology. Well, I described to you the venture exposure that we have, and gee, what do you think they're invested in? So, that's a risk that we worry about. That is a duplicative risk across both publics and privates. And we spend a lot of time digging into understanding them. We think they're actually, I would call it old tech and new tech. They're very different between them, but there is still cross risk. And I think we spend a lot of time thinking about what those unknown risks are in our portfolio. And so a lot of our time, the managers, is the correlations to each other, not necessarily just to the markets. But what we care about with the number of managers that we have is how do they each behave to each other? Because they can all be independently volatile. But if they are all volatile and in a negative way at the same time, that's really bad, right? So it's a question of, are they offsetting to each other at different points in time? Do we have things that counterbalance? And so I think one of our key risks is that we have more fat tail risk with a concentrated portfolio that we could be wrong and get hit on the downside. But we structure that on the grant making side. If we were in an endowment, it'd be much harder to do that. As a foundation, we make grants. And so if we structure our grant program appropriately, we have more flexibility in how we deliver grants that can accommodate more volatility in grant payouts, because we think that ultimately maximizes long-term grant making.
And just curiously for the thing, are you do you have specialized staff, or are you all generalists in this? And which works better in your kind of concentrated portfolio?
Yes, actually, when I joined this role, I went to see 25 endowment foundation CIOs across the country, and one of the key questions that I had was the specialist versus generalist model, because I came from a specialist model, but I understand the value of a generalist model. I think where I came out on that is sort of a hybrid, which is, I think one CIO said it the best, which is, to be a good generalist investor, you need to have a domain expertise to have a seat at the table to be informed. And then you can widen your expertise. And so I think what I really want are people that have strong intellectual capacity that can go very deep and then over time widen that moat and then go across other asset classes. But they have to have curiosity across every asset class. So we do what we call majors and minors. We have 3 risk categories between publics, privates, and hedge funds. We have a senior person that takes sort of a major on each one that sort of is expected to know all the ins and outs, but they minor across the rest of the portfolio, and it's a team decision for every investment.
Great.
Alex, if I could just comment on
Sure.
the concentration issue.
Yeah.
Over the course of the last several years, as the private portion of our book has grown from something that was in the order of 20% up to the current level, which is about 50%. We have gone from being very concentrated, a handful of public, or a couple of public managers, large commitments to a small number of private equity managers, et cetera. We have gotten much more diversified in the 50% that is now in private. So we have probably 18 venture managers, whereas 10 years ago we had 4 or 5. And we haven't quite achieved that, or we're not striving to achieve quite that much diversification in the private equity piece of the book. But we have, I would say we've intentionally gotten very much more diversified because we view the risk at a portfolio level, to Tim's comments about thinking about the whole, we view the higher level of privates means different risk characteristics in the overall portfolio from an illiquidity point of view. And so we've gotten much more diversified, both in the types of investments and the characteristics of those that might provide cash flow streams in some cases, or longer lockup periods, as is the case in much of our venture.
Great.
And I think from our side, we lean a little bit more toward Tim's model. There's only 3 other investment people on the team besides myself, so we are all generalists. And I guess one of the philosophies I've always used is that whoever is on the team, ultimately they want to run their own portfolio. So a big part of my job is training them to be a CIO. You know, not necessarily tomorrow, unless I'm getting the boot out the door, but at some point in their career, they're going to want to run their own portfolio. So having the ability to look across all asset classes, participate in each, make relative decisions, I think has always been an important part of how we've tried to run the office. From a manager standpoint, I think we're sitting on about 45 managers in the office. And not that there's a right number by any means, but I think one of the things that certainly was very topical among lots of CIOs across different organizations was the complaint that I have too many managers. And when I got to the foundation, we had that one moment in time where you had the blank slate and you could say, all right, how would you design this if you could? And we did. So the idea was not proliferate the number of managers too much. The addition of venture and private equity will probably be the delta in terms of how many we end up with. And I've had to coach a few people, you know, whatever the number is not the important thing, but you know, we want each manager to be important and each manager to at least carry like 2 to 3% of the portfolio typically. So whether the number is 50 or, you know, plus or minus, we just want each one to be very, very key to the whole. And again, thinking from a little bit more of a holistic standpoint, as opposed to if you have 150 managers, if they have great returns, it's still shrapnel. So I think we like the smaller is better philosophy.
Yeah, and that kind of brings us to, again, one of the themes, like you said, when you have, whether you have a large current portfolio or you have a large number, a big number of opportunity set. I mean, we talked about, you know, Daniel Gross was here prior to you, and he talked about how he built Greplin or Q, which would then kind of sit atop a calendar or and give you reminders or give you things. So are you, any of you, looking at machine learning actively to implement decision support tools or at your endowments? I mean, is that a nascent effort? I'm sure you're invested in a lot of this, and you see, you know, through your venture managers, the application across various industries. Are more of those type of either tools or approaches crossing your desk?
And is this for investing or for operations?
It's for investing, workflow, across the board.
I mean, from our standpoint, they're two very different things.
Yeah.
From an operational standpoint, I'd say our head of IT doesn't like the cloud. So we're a little bit behind times there, and his boss doesn't use online bill pay.
Wow, so how's your disaster recovery plan?
Well, we just closed it down because it was in another building about 10 miles. We said, if there's a weather event or something like that hits Baltimore, both are going to be wiped out. So we're on a fast and steep evolutionary curve at this point for the operational side. From an investing side, we're looking at a number of things, and one in the portfolio is in the marketplace lending area, and there's quite a bit of machine learning, and the firm is not a whole bunch of finance people; it's all data scientists. So very much a new way to look at a space, and that's been pretty interesting. Working with them as they've grown.
I would say we spend more money on software each year. It's become, instead of just an asterisk at the end of the budget, it's now a meaningful chunk of our annual budget on software that helps with risk analytics and evaluating various return streams that we get from all of our managers. And so we don't have a specific machine learning algorithm that everything goes into. I would say we're spending a lot more money on software these days to evaluate various elements of the investment process.
Yeah, I would say similar. We don't do anything in-house specifically for it, but we definitely are increasing the dollar spend on software and tools. I think it also depends on what asset class you're referring to. I mean, I'd always joke that the privates is sort of in the Stone Age still when it comes to analytics. And so I've been pushing for many years for better analytics, analysis in privates. And so, we've hired a specialist firm that's, we were the, I think, I was their first client in my prior job. I'm their third client at Irvine, she has a master's in data science, and basically telling her what I want and having them build it. And to sort of enhance our analytics on privates. And then, we're on the other side, we're very fortunate. We have a very progressive organization from an IT point of view. So 100% of our organization's in the cloud. So our ability to operate in a mobile environment, et cetera, and just, we're not actually using machine learning or anything, but just to have a progressive IT platform provides the architecture for us to apply other software tools in a thoughtful way.
So all of you have achieved a great measure of success and, kind of are inspiration to aspiring CIOs. What advice would you give to people now, 2 to 5 years out from being at the helm of a top endowment foundation? What is the advice you would have given yourself starting out 10, 15 years ago?
I mean, Alex, I would say I think part of our job is to do the best we can to look over the horizon.
Yeah.
And figure out as best we can what the impact of various trends are likely to be long-term on our portfolios. So we need to be politically aware, economically aware, all of that, but these days more and more just technically aware about how fundamental industries are being changed so radically by new technologies, and to be seeking how we might take advantage of any of those trends with new and emerging either asset classes or investment structures. I think that's one of the benefits that I see in having a very large venture portfolio, is we have an inside look at emerging technologies amongst that collection of managers. I think secondarily and somewhat similarly, looking at the edges for less trafficked asset classes. I mentioned earlier some of the idiosyncratic things that over the course of not too many years have really become institutionalized and represent new opportunities to invest. You need to actively be exploring what those are and how they might fit, and even if they are not fitting into the context of your own portfolio, understanding where they are in the broader context is really useful.
I think along with that is pushing yourself outside your comfort zone and looking at things that look strange, look unusual. You may not be up to speed with something, and pushing yourself to get there and keep stretching. All the while with a high level of intellectual curiosity and ethics, but really, pushing yourself to go beyond the bounds of comfort. And if everyone on the team is doing that, then you find the expansion with the teammates that you have.
Yeah, I would echo that. I would say the curiosity is critical, and pushing yourself and building on that. I would say don't be afraid to be a first mover. And don't just follow what everybody else is doing. I mean, I've done a number of things in my career. When I did it, people thought I was nuts, and today they're common sense. And so I just think obviously it takes a fair amount of conviction in yourself. But part of my willingness to do that was also, if you hire great people that work for you, don't hire people that agree with you. Hire people that challenge you and make you a better investor because they push you. I think at the end of the day, when I hire a team, it's not always about who's the nicest or who am I going to get along with the easiest. It's who's going to make me the best investor and make the institution the best investor so we get the best outcomes.